Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast, celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast with me, Tom. Now, a few weeks ago, I put a call on social media for you to vote for your favourite Gary Numan albums of all time. Thanks to the hundreds of you who voted, you had to rank the albums from worst to best and giving the average results for this chart. So now remember, this isn't exactly definitive, it's only a bit of fun really. We all have our personal favourites and not so favourites, but as it's the Christmas period, it's a good excuse for a rundown. So, without further ado, here is the all-time best Numan albums as voted for by you. So there's 24 albums in total on the list, and we start at number 24 with an album that makes sense that it's at the bottom, as it's technically not a proper Numan album, but I thought I'd include it as it was a full studio album. It's Automatic with Bill Sharp. Automatic, released in 1989, was Gary Numan's collaborative album with Bill Sharp of Shack Attack fame. Following their 1985 hit single Change Your Mind, which reached number 17 in the UK charts, the duo decided to create a full album together. The project merged Sharp's jazz-funk keyboard style with Numan's distinctive vocals and electronica. The album itself saw limited commercial success, though it did spawn another single, I'm on Automatic. Numan later reflected that while he enjoyed working with Sharp, his heart wasn't fully in the project during this period, as he was struggling with his own musical direction at the time. The album stands as an interesting detour in both artists' careers, a curious blend of late 80s electronic pop and jazz funk that sounds quite different from either artist's main body of work.
The album was called Automatic and was released with little fanfare by Polydor in June 1989, only reaching number 59 in the chart. My creative contribution to it was essentially limited to the lyrics and vocals. Bill did everything else, along with Nick Smith. They put together a well-crafted album, but in truth, I was little more than a guest vocalist. As for any meaningful campaign to help it, Polydor really did just throw it at the wall to see if it stuck, and it didn't.
And it can be no surprise that at number 23 and Gary's lowest solo album is 1992's Machine and Soul. An album that Gary himself has openly admitted was his lowest creative point. Made purely to fulfill contractual obligations with IRS Records, Numan later called it probably the worst album I've ever made. The album attempted to capture the dance pop sound of the early 90s, but both critics and fans found it missed the mark. Despite featuring some strong musicians, the album failed to chart in the UK, a first for Numan since his early Chw Amis days. And Numan would later describe this period as rock bottom. The album's commercial failure actually proved to be a blessing in disguise, as it pushed Numan to completely reinvent his sound, leading to the darker industrial direction he'd take with Sacrifice just 2 years later.
And as a piece of music, there's nothing wrong with it. But as a Gary Numan album, it's the worst thing I've ever done. It had nothing Gary Numan about it. Absolutely nothing. I was so lost for ideas, I even put one of the Prince covers I'd done on it. I tried and tried to convince myself that it was the right album, but I knew it wasn't. It was all I had. So I released the worst album I've ever made when I needed to have made the best. I don't think I have ever felt more ashamed and hopeless. The sleeve was shit as well. I hadn't just lost my way musically, I'd lost it in every way.
Number 22, we have 1991's Outland. An album that saw Numan trying to balance his darker creative instincts with commercial appeal. Released through IRS Records, it featured the singles Heart and My World Storm, but neither made much chart impact. The album peaked at number 39 in the UK charts and received mixed reviews. Some felt that the album was caught between two worlds, not pop enough for the mainstream, but not experimental enough for his core fan base. Numan himself has described this period as challenging, saying, "I was still trying to write hits rather than just trying to make the music I wanted to make."
Outland was released in March 91, reached number 39 and sold more than 30,000 copies in the UK, which wasn't too bad at all. I was actually quite pleased with that. IRS only released one single from it though, a song called Heart, mainly because they were still upset that I hadn't wanted to go down the dance remix route, I think. I'm not sure that releasing another single would have helped much. Outland was also released in the USA, but I suspect IRS had already decided not to bother by then, as they did almost nothing to promote it. I did one interview with the US journalist who wasn't even aware I had a new album out, which pretty much said it all.
At number 21 is 1988's Metal Rhythm, which arrived during a challenging period for Numan. The album suffered from record company interference. In fact, IRS Records even retitled it New Anger for its US release and changed the track order, much to Gary's frustration. The album spawned a couple of singles, New Anger in America, but none made significant chart impact. The record itself peaked at number 48 in the UK, continuing the commercial decline Numan was experiencing in the late 80s. Numan later admitted he was struggling creatively during this period, saying, "I was trying too hard to be commercial rather than following my own instincts." The album's difficult birth and mixed reception contributed to Numan's growing disillusionment with the music industry, though some fans maintain it's an underrated entry in his catalogue.
In the USA, they changed the album title to New Anger, changed the sleeve, and not for the better, and messed around with the tracks, which was really quite upsetting. They added some songs from Berserker, which made absolutely no sense at all to me, because the two albums had entirely different sounds and were years apart. I was horrified by what they were doing. In the UK, The album barely scraped into the top 50, as did the next single, America. It was all very disappointing.
Number 20 is 2003's Hybrid. A unique entry in Numan's catalogue that saw him reimagining tracks from his previous albums. Technically a remix or even compilation album, I felt it was so unique and full of new material I wanted to include it in this list. Working with producers like Rico, Andy Gray and Sulphur, Numan reconstructed songs from Pure, Sacrifice and Exile with heavier industrial arrangements. The album also featured dramatically reworked versions of classic tracks like Cars and Our Friends Electric, plus newer material like Pure and Torn. Critics were generally positive, with many praising the fresh take on classic material. Numan has expressed pride in the project, particularly for breathing new life into older songs. He noted that some versions, like the Andy Gray remix of A Prayer for the Unborn, became regular features in his live shows. While not a commercial success, the album demonstrated Numan's willingness to revisit and reinvent his back catalogue. The record stands as an interesting experiment in Numan's discography, not quite a remix album, not quite a greatest hits, but something entirely its own.
I loved Hybrid. It had contributions from Sulphur, Andy Gray, Curve, legendary producers Alan Moulder and Flood, and more. And I thought every one of them had created an exceptional new version of my original. Or even added a new version of me, plus the new songs Ancients that I'd done with Andy Gray and Crazier that I'd worked on with Rico. The feedback was fantastic from the fans and the media. The Independent newspaper put a picture of me on the cover and wrote, "The one and future king of electropop is finally cool again."
At 19 is 1986's Strange Charm. Released during a period of commercial decline, the album peaked at number 59 in the UK charts, but it did produce one of Numan's more successful singles of the mid-80s, with This Is Love reaching number 28. The second single, I Can't Stop, featured saxophone prominently, a departure from his earlier purely synthetic arrangements. Numan later reflected that this was a difficult time for him creatively, saying he was being pulled in different directions by record company pressure and his own artistic instincts. Something of a forgotten gem, this album is arguably the start of Numan's downward era of the late 80s and early 90s, which ended with Machine and Soul.
On Strange Charm, the stress and the disappointment of the way things were unfolding around me really began to have a negative effect. I was constantly stressed, unhappy with many of the things I was writing, unhappy with everything. With Strange Charm, I seemed to run out of ideas, and the album only had 8 songs. It was an unhappy album. It also performed really badly, barely scraping into the top 60. It actually sold similar numbers to The Fury and Berserker over time, but with very little promotion, no radio play, and particularly no tour to support it in that first week of release, the sales were too low in any given week to make much impression on the chart.
This is pain disguised as a dream. Memories are guaranteed to break your heart.
At number 18 is 2006's Jagged. Produced by Ade Fenton, who had become a long-term collaborator, the album continued the heavy industrial direction of Pure, but with an even harder edge. The album peaked at number 59 in the UK charts, and it had been a long 6 years since Pure, but perhaps Jagged didn't quite live up to its predecessor. The songs showcased the album's intense, aggressive sound. Numan later described the record as Pure's angry brother, noting that it was deliberately harsher and more hostile than its predecessor. Critics praised the album's dark atmosphere, with Sideline magazine calling it one of the darkest releases ever from Gary Numan. The record featured some of Numan's most brutal arrangements to date, particularly on tracks like Slave and Pressure, and the album marks the beginning of Numan's productive partnership with Fenton, which continues to this day.
In March, I released Jagged through Cooking Vinyl. The reviews were not what I'd feared. In fact, they were every bit as good as they'd been for Pure, if not better. It had taken me 5 years to put Jagged together, a time span fueled in no small part by my fears of what was to come when it was released, and I couldn't have been more wrong. The album had taken a turn, lyrically, from the Sacrifice, Exile and Pure albums I'd made previously. With Jagged, I wanted to move away from my thoughts on faith and religion, but I had little else that fired me up. So, I looked at my past, and in particular the less savoury side of it. I wrote about the things I'd done, the people I'd met, the things I was ashamed of, and some that I wasn't ashamed of but probably should have been. It was like a catalogue of guilt. One of the best press comments I read about Jagged was that it was so pulverisingly powerful that listening to it on headphones was not unlike putting one's head into a machine that compressed cars into metric square cuboids, which was exactly what I was trying to do.
Mistake, treat love a turn to hate.
17, a bit of a cheat, is The Plan, released in 1984. This album collected early Chw Amis demos recorded between 76 and 78, offering fans a fascinating glimpse into Numan's punk rock origins before he discovered synthesizers. These raw recordings reveal a very different Gary Numan. They mainly show Chw Amis as a straight-up punk band, though you can hear glimpses of the sci-fi themes that would later define Numan's work. The album reached number 29 in the UK charts, which was pretty impressive for what was essentially a collection of demo recordings. Numan himself has expressed mixed feelings about the release, acknowledging that while the records are rough, they document an important part of his musical evolution.
Beggars Banquet had been going through their archives, and they found a whole bunch of unreleased recordings of my punk songs that I could barely remember even doing. They were all gathered together, and an album called The Plan was released at the end of '84. I was very surprised to see the album chart in the UK Top 30.
At number 16, we have 2011's Dead Sun Rising. Produced with Ade Fenton and largely built from unused songs and ideas from previous projects. Despite its origins, the album developed its own distinct identity, with critics praising its atmospheric, cinematic quality. It showcased the sound that bridged the industrial aggression of Jagged with more textured, atmospheric elements. Released through Mortal Records, the album reached number 87 on the UK charts. Numan described the project as something that grew into something I could never have expected. Originally planned as a quick side project between major releases, it evolved into something more substantial during recording. The album's dense, layered production and dark themes would hint at directions he'd explore further on later releases. While not making massive commercial waves, Dead Sun Rising was well received by fans and critics alike, with many praising its blend of heavy electronics and orchestral elements.
Dead Sun Rising was finally released in September in multiple formats. In some respects, I never got away from the original idea of it being a stopgap outtakes album, so I made no attempt to have it released and distributed properly. It would, in essence, be sold exclusively to those fans who followed me on social media, on my website, on those who used the Gary Numan online store. It wasn't really available in many places outside of the store. Looking back, I can only wonder at how well it might have done if I'd released it properly.
And number 15 is 1985's The Fury. Released during a challenging transition period as Numan moved away from major labels to form his own Numa Records. The album reached number 24 and spawned 3 singles. The record saw Numan experimenting with a more funk-influenced sound. Critics at the time were divided, some praised his willingness to evolve, while others missed his earlier, colder electronic style. Pull Out the Dogs proved to be the album's biggest hit. Numan himself has mixed feelings about this period, later admitting he was trying to find a new direction while dealing with significant industry pressure and financial challenges. The album stands as an interesting snapshot of mid-80s Numan, capturing an artist in transition between his early synth-pop success and the darker industrial sound he'd later embrace.
The album did a little better than the singles, reaching number 24, but things were definitely not going in the right direction, and My Fall from Glory seemed to be nigh on unstoppable. It was all very disappointing, to say the least. But it was so much more than that. For several years, I've been confident that fighting my way back up was just a matter of time. Not if, but when.
And landing at number 14 is 1997's Exile. The second album in Numan's dark religious trilogy following Sacrifice. The record reached number 43 in the UK charts and marked Numan's continued exploration of industrial rock sounds combined with controversial religious themes. Released through Eagle Records, Exile saw Numan taking on organised religion head-on, particularly in tracks like Dominion Day and Dark. The album's dark themes were matched by its heavy sound, with Numan noting it was deliberately anti-Christian. Critics praised the album's intensity and focus, while with many considering it a stronger, more refined work than its predecessor. The record helped cement Numan's comeback that began with Sacrifice, further establishing his credibility with industrial music fans. While it might have alienated some listeners with its controversial themes, Exile stands as one of Numan's most uncompromising and coherent albums of the 90s.
Exile was eventually finished in June, and despite all my worries, I was happy with the end result. Like Sacrifice, it was mostly a one-man effort, in that I produced it, engineered it, wrote the songs, and played almost everything. It took a different slant on the religious theme. With Exile, I took the point of view of what if I was wrong? What if God did exist? This time it was more about what if there really was a God that allowed the horrors of the world to take place day in and day out. That would be truly terrifying. Every song was connected to the central idea that God and the devil are one and the same, and that heaven and hell are the same place. It's our perspective that makes it one or the other.
This is absolute. This is absolution. This is absolute. This is absolution.
And number 13 is 1983's Warriors. An album that marked a significant turning point in Numan's career. Released through Beggar's Banquet, it was his final album for the label and reached number 12 in the UK charts. The album featured Dick Morrissey on saxophone, and the title track was released as the lead single, reaching number 20, followed by Sister Surprise. Warriors saw Numan collaborating with producer Bill Nelson of Bebop Deluxe fame, though the partnership ended up being short-lived and somewhat fractious. This was the last album Numan would record before forming his own label, and while it marked the end of his most commercially successful period, Warriors stands as an interesting bridge between his early synthetic sound and his later experimental work.
When the album was finished, I didn't like Bill's mixes. I thought they were bass light and tinny sounding. I had them redone, so Bill had his name removed from the credits. He did some incredible work on that album that I don't think I fully appreciated until long after it was finished. Relationship issues aside, it was an honour and a privilege to be in the studio and listen to him play. Back in '83, I was desperate to make my albums more musically proficient, so I brought in amazing musicians to make up for what I saw as my lack of ability. Although I sold millions of albums and had won many awards, I felt like a fraud, embarrassed by and undeserving of my success. So, as well as Bill Nelson, the album featured a lineup of extraordinary musicians.
And number 12 is 2013's Splinter Songs from a Broken Mind. Which gave Numan his first UK top 20 album in over 30 years, reaching number 20. Produced with longtime collaborator Ade Fenton, the album was written during Numan's battle with depression, lending tracks like Lost and The Calling a raw, emotional honesty. Critics praised the album extensively, with many calling it his best work since the early 80s. The album's themes of mental health and personal struggle resonated strongly with fans, while its dense, textured sound showed Numan was still pushing his music into new territory.
When it was complete, it was clear that the majority of the songs were connected to my depression. There were songs about how it had affected my relationship with Gemma, Everything Comes Down to This and Lost, and songs that tried to put into words how it felt at its darkest point to be truly depressed, such as Here in the Black and more. I decided to add an additional element to the title. The album would be called Splinter Songs from a Broken Mind.
number 11 is 1994's Sacrifice, a pivotal album that marked a dramatic rebirth for Numan. After the commercial disappointments of Machine and Soul and Outland, Numan decided to completely reinvent his sound, creating what many consider his darkest and most personal record at the time. Recorded largely alone in his home studio, Sacrifice saw Numan embracing heavy industrial influences and gothic textures. The album marked the beginning of his dark trilogy and featured standout tracks like A Question of Faith and Deadliner. While it didn't chart in the UK, the album rebuilt his credibility with critics and fans alike. Numan himself considers this album a crucial turning point, saying it was the first time he'd made exactly the music he wanted to make without commercial pressure. He's often cited it as the moment he got his confidence back as an artist. Despite its minimal promotion and initial modest sales, Sacrifice has become a fan favourite and influenced the direction of all his subsequent work. Its blend of industrial sounds and religious themes would set the template for albums like Exile and Pure.
Sacrifice was released on 24th October 1994, and although the singles from it didn't fare well, the album did much better, eventually selling far more than Machine and Soul. Strangely, whereas Machine and Soul had reached number 42 in the chart, Sacrifice only made it to 94, my worst album chart position ever. The thing about Sacrifice was that it started to bring fans back from the cold. For most fans, it seemed to be a welcome return to form, and the response to the album was better than anything I'd had for years. My fan club membership soared. Sacrifice sold slowly but steadily as word of it spread, and it felt very much as though we'd turned a corner. I was confident about my writing again, happy with the way I looked, happy to be making albums. It was all so different.
So boy, welcome to sleep. I'm gonna make you bleed. Boy, welcome to sleep. I'm gonna make you bleed. They say soul, my soul, away, one-way sound. Sometimes it almost makes me cry. Sometimes it seems to call my name. If I believe, if I should wonder, if I forgive, then would you come for me?
And number 10 is 2000's Pure, album that saw Numan fully embracing his industrial rock sound to create one of his heaviest and most intense records. Reaching number 58 in the UK charts, Pure became highly influential in industrial music circles and earned Numan significant respect from a new generation of artists. The album was full of crushing guitars and atmospheric synths, and the songs showcased Numan's darkest and most aggressive production to date. Numan has described Pure as one of his most difficult albums to make, spending over 4 years perfecting its dense, layered sound. The hard work paid off. Critics praised the record's uncompromising nature, with many considering it his best work since his early classics. While not a huge commercial success, Pure cemented Numan's position as a legitimate influence on industrial rock, earning him respect from artists like Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson.
Eagle Records released Pure on 9th October 2000. The fans loved it. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, and I was greatly relieved. By the time the album was finished, I'd grown to feel very positive about it. My uncertainties during the making of it had evaporated, and I thought it was the perfect follow-up to Exile. It was harder, even more aggressive, more anthemic. It was exactly what I thought it should be for that time. It more than consolidated the new direction I'd taken with Sacrifice and developed with Exile. Pure made it very clear that I'd found the path I wanted to be on.
Number 9 is 1982's I, Assassin. Numan's fourth solo album, which reached number 8 in the UK charts. The record saw him incorporating fretless bass and funk elements into his electronic sound, particularly evident in the singles We Take Mystery to Bed and White Boys and Heroes. Music for Chameleons was also released as a single, with all three reaching the UK top 20. The album showcased some of Numan's most sophisticated arrangements to date, with bassist Pino Palladino's distinctive fretless work becoming a crucial part of the record's sound. Numan himself has spoken fondly of this period. The album marked the point where he began moving away from pure synthpop towards a more experimental direction. While some fans missed his earlier colder electronic style, I, Assassin stands as one of Numan's most groove-oriented albums, proving he could successfully evolve beyond the robotic persona that made him famous.
Pino was, and still is, an extraordinary player with a unique style. After listening to him play on some of the I, Assassin songs, I decided to make the bass a lead melody instrument instead of just underpinning the grooves, which is the way it is usually employed. It gave the album a very different sound and feel to anything I'd done before, and I was massively proud of it. Lyrically, I, Assassin also moved on a little from the previous albums. The paranoia was largely gone, and I found at times a lighter way of seeing things. I felt more prepared for what was to come, more complete as a person.
Listen good, don't cry for me and don't cry anymore. Now just shut your mouth and this point of view appeals to me. Listen babe, say you got no one tonight. Listen babe, say you got no one.
And number 8 is 2017's Savage, Songs from a Broken World. A dystopian concept album about a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by climate change. The record gave Numan his highest UK chart position in over 30 years, reaching number 2, and earned some of his strongest reviews of his career. Produced again with Aid Fenton, the album merged Numan's industrial sound with Middle Eastern influences. Lead single My Name Is Ruined featured backing vocals from his daughter Persia, becoming an instant fan favourite. Savage proved that 4 decades into his career, Numan was still capable of creating vital, relevant music that could both chart highly and earn critical acclaim.
So, I sat with Gemma in our hotel room and waited for the phone to ring. When it did, Gemma answered and seemed to not be excited at the news, and my heart sank. Then she very calmly said, "Number 2. And nearly 40 years of longing and hoping and battling and setbacks all came out at once, and I cried like a baby. I had no idea the emotion was there waiting to come out. No idea at all. I didn't expect it, but it was instant. It caught me by surprise, and I didn't know what to do with it other than just sit there with my head in my hands and wait for it to stop. It was quite possibly the greatest career moment of my life. People assume that it couldn't compare to when I was number 1, but they don't see it the way I do. It's not just about the chart position. It's about knowing you've finally got back to a point that is undeniably successful. That number 2 was the end result of a 35-year struggle, and it honestly meant more to me than all the number 1s. They had come easy. This had taken more than half of my life.
Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. Oh, know who you are, so I remind you how you came to be here.
And number 7 is 1984's Berserker. Numan's first release on his own Numa Records label, the album reached number 45 in the UK charts, marking the start of a commercially challenging period that had since become a cult favourite. The title track was released as a single, reaching number 32, and introduced Numan's striking new image, Berserker saw Numan exploring new sonic territory with more layered synths and prominent use of the PPG Wave computer, creating a distinctive icy electronic sound. Numan himself has mixed feelings about this era, though he's acknowledged the album has some of his better songwriting from the mid-80s. The record's unique sound and aesthetic have earned it a special place in Numan's catalogue, with many fans considering it an underrated gem from his wilderness years.
I was very happy with the album, both musically and visually. On Berserker, I started to work with a new synth called the PPG Wave. The PPG was owned by two men, Mike Smith and Ian Heron, who would do battle with it each day to try and get the best out of it. It was a computer-based synth and behaved more like a difficult child than a piece of technology. On a good day, though, it was highly impressive. The PPG was the heart and soul of Berserker. I was able to use sound in ways that hadn't really been available before. One of the most used sounds, for example, was of a chair leg being dragged. It often adapted sounds without you asking it to, and either ruined what you had or created something new and unique. We sometimes used bizarre noises instead of drums or anything conventional. Every day in the studio was a walk into the unexpected.
Number 6 is 2021's Intruder. Numan's follow-up to Savage and another dystopian concept piece, this time telling the story of climate change from Earth's perspective. The album gave Numan another high chart position, also reaching number 2. Again working with Aid Fenton, Numan created what many consider his heaviest album yet. Lead single Intruder set the tone with its massive industrial sound, while tracks like Now and Forever showcased his more melodic side. Critics praised the album's ambition and intensity, with the Quietist calling it a soundtrack for a world on fire. Released during the pandemic, Numan couldn't tour the album immediately, but later performed it with a full band and striking visual production that emphasised its apocalyptic themes.
Intruder was, in some respects, going to be a further exploration of ideas around the impending catastrophe of global warming. However, where Savage had been a series of fantasy stories set in a future Earth devastated by climate change, Intruder would be written from the Earth's point of view. If the planet could speak and voice its feelings, what would it say? Would it be angry and hurt? Would it feel betrayed? Would it want to fight back? Had it already begun?
Now and forever, I know all things end. I'll be lost in the forever until I find you you lose breath and pretend that it matters, but don't you wish to just listen? You can hide in the shadows and pretend I won't find you, but don't you wish to just listen? And this is who you are. And this is who you are. Can you see me? Can you feel me? Can you hear me? I am screaming.
Into the top 5, and at number 5 is Chw Amis' self-titled debut from 1978. Released on Beggars Banquet, this was Numan's first proper album, recorded as a three-piece band during his discovery of synths, which would change everything. The album didn't chart on its initial release, though it was later reissued and reached number 14 in 1981. This is essentially Numan's punk album, though signs of his future direction were emerging. While predominantly guitar-based, it already showed his fascination with sci-fi themes. Numan has said he was heavily influenced by authors like Philip K. Dick during this period. The album stands as a fascinating document of an artist on the verge of transformation. It was here that Numan would discover the Mini-Moog in the studio and completely revolutionise his sound.
The first Chw Amis album was essentially meant to be the live set we'd been playing, but I had plenty of other songs as well. To start moving away from the punk style, we would need some of those. It was an exciting time. Simply going to a studio to record our first album was a dream come true. When we arrived at Spacewood, I went in to say hello to the recording engineer, Mike Kemp, who also owned the studio and had, I think, pretty much built it. While Paul and Jess were unloading the equipment from the van, I went into the control room with Mike and noticed a synthesizer on the desk in the corner. It was a Mini-Moog. I'd never seen a real synth before, and it was a fascinating machine to look at. Dials and switches from one side to the other. The rear section tipped up like a portable control panel. In many ways, it reminded me of the control panel my dad had made for me as a child, except this one looked incredibly high-tech. I'd always associated synths with prog rock bands like Yes and ELP, and that sort of music had never really been of any interest to me. I'd liked some of what Kraftwerk had done, and I really liked some of the things Bowie had done with Brian Eno, but none of it had ever made me think of synths as a way forward for me.
In black and white, I'd even try to look ashamed. I unstick pages and read. I look at pictures of you. I smell the lust in my hand. Oh, every day I die. Please listen to the sirens. We don't wish to be your friends. Please listen to the sirens. We will never part again. Memories lost in faded films of my life. We burned out and the line went dead. At 6 o'clock, I felt so alone. I crawled inside, where else to go? I could be dead for all you know.
At number 4 is 1981's Dance. The Numan's most radical departure at the time from his signature electronic sound. The album reached number 3 and saw him exploring new territory of atmospheric, Japan-influenced art rock and electronic jazz elements. The album's centrepiece, She's Got Claws, reached number 6, while fan favourites like Slow Car to China and The Subway Called You showcased Numan's new direction. The record featured several notable guest musicians, including Japan's Mick Karn. This was Numan consciously moving away from pure synth music, telling the press at the time he was fed up with being the Gary Numan machine. The 9-minute opener and the stripped-back stories proves he could write beyond the confines of 3-minute pop songs. Critics were divided, but Dance has aged particularly well, with many now considering it one of his most sophisticated and adventurous albums. Numan himself has cited it as one of his personal favourites, and particularly proud of its experimental nature and jazz influences.
The Dance album entered the charts at number 3 in September 1981. It was a very different animal to the things I'd done before, and I loved it. I thought I successfully changed shape and gone in a new direction, musically and visually. I had a new image, based on the underground ghost, and a definite change of style musically. I remember Martin Mills from Beggar's Banquet sitting down and listening through it with me. At the end he said, "I can't really hear a single." I knew from that, and the conversation that followed, that he didn't think it was the album I should have made. I still love that album, but the sales made it clear the fans were not so keen.
Yes, that's great. That's like your band of hope. Here on the ground, on the floor, screaming nothing at all. Here on the ground, like some fool looking down on you all. Until I just I'm not sure. The cafe is out, but the candlelight knows she orders Beaujolais wine and says the thought of you toe.
So here we are into the top 3, and at number 3, I'll be honest, and predicted this would be number 1, but it's at number 3, 1979's The Pleasure Principle. Numan's first solo album and a landmark in electronic music. Famously recorded without any guitars, the album topped the UK charts and spawned his international hit single Cars, which reached number 1 in the UK and number 9 in the US. The album's distinctive sound came from its unique combination of mini-moog synths and live drums, with tracks like Metal and Films becoming massively influential on the emerging synth-pop and hip-hop scenes. Complex was the follow-up to Cars and also reached number 6 in the UK. Numan wrote much of the album in just 6 days and has often said he was trying to create synthesizer punk. The record's cold mechanical sound and sci-fi themes perfectly matched his android-like stage persona, while the striking cover photo of Numan in a grey suit alongside a red prism became an iconic image. The Pleasure Principle's influence continues today. Metal has been covered by 9 Inch Nails, while Cars remains Numan's most recognised song. The album regularly appears in lists of the most important albums ever made.
I decided to make the Pleasure Principle even more electronic. I would have no guitars on it at all. It would have drums, bass, keyboards obviously, even a viola, but no guitars. I wanted to prove that the guitar was not the be-all and end-all of music, and I wanted to show that electronic music was something very new. What better way to do that than remove the one instrument long considered absolutely essential? What people had considered real music for so long needed to change. The pleasure principle title came from a painting by the Belgian surrealist artist René Magritte. The sleeve was an adaptation of the painting, but with a clear nod towards technology. Where Magritte had a rock on a desk, for example, I had a glowing purple perspex pyramid. Lyrically, the album continued with a smattering of sci-fi ideas, but it was not a theme album the way Replicas had been.
And number 2, also from 1979, is Replicas. Technically the second Chw Amis album, but essentially Numan's breakthrough record. After discovering a mini Moog in the studio for his previous album, he completely transformed the band's sound, creating a dystopian masterpiece that topped the UK album charts. The album gave Numan his first #1 single with Our Friends Electric, a nearly 5.5-minute electronic epic about android prostitutes that somehow captured the public's imagination. Down in the Park didn't chart, but has become one of his most covered songs, with versions by Foo Fighters and Marilyn Manson. Inspired by Philip K. Dick and J.G. Ballard, Numan created a concept album about a dystopian world ruled by machines and machine music. Tracks like Me I Disconnect From You and You Are In My Vision perfectly captured this dark future vision, while It Must Have Been Years and When the Machines Rock showed his punk roots weren't entirely gone. The album's success prompted Numan to dissolve Chw Amis as a name and go solo, but Replicas stands as the perfect fusion of his punk energy and electronic innovation. Its influence can be heard in everything from industrial music to synth pop to modern electronica.
Replicas was very much a science fiction album. I've been writing a series of short stories at the time about what I thought London might become in the next 50 years or so. The central idea being that control was handed over to a machine, a computer that, absent of political ideology and bias, would be better suited to fixing problems fairly and efficiently. But the machine realised that the biggest problem was people. Without people, London and the world would run smoothly and peacefully. So it devised a scheme that would allow for the systematic elimination of humans one by one. The writing of replicas came together quickly because I already had all of those stories and characters. All I needed to do was adapt them into lyrics.
I hate to ask, but the friend's electric. Only mine's broke down, and now I've no one to love. Down in the park where the Magmen meet the machines and play kill by numbers. Down in the park with a friend called Five. I was in a car crash, or was it the war? But I've never been quite the same. Little white lies like I was there. The alarm rang for days. You could tell from conversations. I was waiting by the screen. I couldn't recognize my photograph. Me, I disconnect from you. We are so fragile. I can stay here inside and say it's all being done. We are so fragile. Just pretend I never try to leave it up to you. You are in my vision, I can turn my face. You are in my vision, I can move my eyes. You are in my vision, I can move at all. You are in my vision.
And so here we are. That can only mean that at number 1, the greatest Gary Numan album ever, as voted for by you, is 1980's Telecon. It became his third consecutive UK number 1 album and spawned 2 top 10 singles, We Are Glass and I Die You Die, though they weren't actually on the album at the time, with this record also reaching number 20. Telecon saw Numan at his creative peak, expanding his electronic sound with live strings and more complex arrangements. The pressure of fame heavily influenced the album's themes, with tracks like Please Push No More dealing directly with his struggle with celebrity. Numan later said that the album reflected his growing discomfort with stardom, calling it a love-hate letter to the fame machine. Recorded at Rock City Studios in Shepperton, the album marked the return of guitars to Numan's sound while retaining the distinctive synth work that made him famous. Sleep by Windows and the haunting title track showcase a new maturity in his songwriting, while Remember I Was Vapor and the Air Crash Bureau continued his exploration of sci-fi themes. After Telecon's success, Numan shocked fans by announcing his retirement from live performance with his legendary farewell shows at Wembley Arena. While this retirement proved short-lived, Telecon stands as the spectacular culmination of his first golden era.
Telecon was different to anything I'd done before. Whereas before I sung about machines and my thoughts about the future, I now wrote about the overwhelming assault of pressure and emotions that came with success. Songs like We Are Glass and Remind Me to Smile are about fans and the strange and sometimes difficult relationship with them that now seem to be a part of life. It so often sounds ridiculous to say anything negative about something that you'd wanted all your life, something that so many people dream of for themselves. It seems ungrateful and petty, whinging at its worst by a pampered child. I totally understand that. But all that dreaming and desire is done largely in ignorance. In truth, you have no idea what's involved, what your life will be like. Becoming famous was absolutely nothing like I expected. And Telecon is an uncomfortable journey through that shock realization.
We write suggestions, suggesting fade into silence, and that must please you. My mirror's tarnished with no help. This wreckage I call me would like to frame your voice. This wreckage I call me would like to meet you soon. Remind me to smile, you know, new friends line. It gets so I feel like I'm in this glass cage. We are close, we are hurt, and so that was love. Love, she kills me. It needs to so. Please wish no more. Please wish no more. Please wish no more. Please wish no more. An echo bug guy who's for a victim is but who are you? They roll out, holy, holy, and I die, yeah, that love wants them turn on me.
there we have it, the best Gary Numan albums ranked, and you can't complain too hard if you don't agree, as you guys picked the list. So thanks so much for voting and making this podcast episode happen. Let me know your thoughts on the list. Do you agree, disagree, why? Let me know on socials at Numan Podcast, or email me numanpodcast@gmail.com. Well, I hope you had a great holiday period and a brilliant new year. I have lots of big plans for the podcast in 2025. But thanks to every single one of you for listening at any point. It means a huge amount. Please do get in touch. I'll be back next time with a regular episode. But until then, take care and speak soon.
Just one of those boys. We are glass. We are glass. We are gold. We're not supposed to cry. But it's all just
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast celebrating the tracks by a musical pioneer.